Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. For the USA music legend, George Strait music isn't always the entirety, the successful US of a musician turned into at the verge of losing his track career, so he should focus on his spouse. Norma. Strait Norma has performed a key part in George's career, and is often the quiet force for calm and reason in his career. She has constantly been there for him, even acting in the music video of his track Código. But now George needs to be there for Norma as the echoes of a shared loss weighs on Norma's coronary heart. George Strait and his spouse met whilst he was in high college. However, they weren't speaking yet, they saw each different round. However, that changed into it, perhaps George become preserving, again due to the fact he turned into busy and couldn't dedicate his father. John Byron directly senior changed into a junior excessive school arithmetic trainer hooned at 100-acre cattle ranch out of doors of Large Wells, Texas. So George's weekend changed into typically interested in working on the farm animals ranch in the course of summer. George labored each day on the ranch, and he loved it. However, at some point he asked Norma out on a date. George determined her virtually pretty, and even defined her as warm. Even at that, after that one date, he failed to see her. For a long time, George had come to bed distracted via the motions of life. But become there any other reason for his refusal to decide to Norma? When he became inside the 4th grade, his parents divorced, and this led to his circle of relatives splitting up. His sister Pensy went to stay together with his mom at the same time as him and his brother John Friend Jr. stayed with his father. Him and his brother Friend and his father endured to work on his farm. But George felt that something was missing in his existence, while he failed to see Norma once more. His thoughts became nonetheless on her. So he went to her again, and they commenced thus far. At the same time as they were in Peachell High faculty, which they each attended. Talking of excessive college, it wasn't most effective romance that George was pursuing as a lot as he loved, operating at the ranch and loving life as a cowboy roper. Something else referred to as George's interest tune. George cherished music, and he wanted to be a musician. Contrary to the mythical parent he currently is as a country musician. George's first style of tune became rock and roll, like many young Americans at the time. George became also stuck up in the British invasion technology rock craze whilst they turned into Imperial excessive faculty. He joined a music institution, the Stoics, and drew most of their proposal from the Beatles and different British artists, while the British invasion technology rock drew large followership. George's choice to pick out that style became thrilling considering how massive country tune changed into in Texas. He was so far removed from U.S. tune so a good deal so that he failed to pay attention to it. On the radio preferring farmers, report as a substitute, he followed any place rock and roll track led him and completed for numerous other businesses. But something changed. George eventually listened to a song by Looking a Stay performance, and their performance caused him viewing extra us of a music live performances. So his track interest modified, he stuck the US of a song. Worm and often commenced to concentrate to the likes of Frank Sinatra, Hank Thompson, Lefty Frizzle, Merle Haggard, George Jones, Bob Wills, and Hank Williams, ultimately with the selection of style in hand. George appeared at the Journey to Life as an expert musician. However, he didn't have the entirety he wished, but after the preliminary, on and off courting he had, with Norma, George become ready to take matters to the following stage, and what he didn't next can be taken into consideration as romantic, or simply simple crazy, or perhaps a little bit of each. He eloped with Normato, Mexico after their high school graduation and got married there on December 4th, 1971. It changed into them towards the sector, and George cherished the chance. After the two were given married, George and Norma back to Peel and had a church wedding there. Union became something that seemed directly out of a romance novel. But the tragedy that passed off them after becomes something even the maximum cold-hearted writer wouldn't be eager to write down. Thalos that would damage Norma and George turned into coming. But at that point they enjoyed their peaceful life. George's ardor wasn't only for his spouse A. Song and cowboy roping, he loved America. And while the time came for him to enlist in 1971, he did so without worry. he became keen to serve and do his bit for America. Instantly have become an infantryman and posted to Schofield Barracks in Hawaii after he changed into posted to Hawaii. Norma joined him and the two began to live as a pair. Then, on October 6, 1972, they have become a circle of relatives when his wife gave start to their daughter. Jennifer George now had the whole thing he ever desired well. No longer the whole lot, however, he soon fixed that George maintained his passion. He never left it on my own. At Texas State University, George saw a flyer that U.S.A. band Stony Ridge published round the campus. They wanted a brand new vocalist and Strait right away auditioned and joined them. He even became a prominent member of the band as he changed their call to the Ace inside the entire band. The band finished round Texas, ordinarily in honky SS and bars, and soon they commenced to end up popular inside the region and open for national acts such as the Texas Playboys and Asleep on the Wheel. As their regional fame grew unbiased, label D Record, which became primarily based in Houston, supplied the band the Risk Tour Report singles. It was a top-notch possibility for them and Strait wrote the songs. But sadly, the songs didn't. Hit immediately was getting annoyed now, however. Norma kept one, encouraging him to make ends meet. Strait persevered to work on his father's livestock ranch for the duration of the day. To make money, his circle of relatives wished with the songs which they recorded with Dord failing. George misplaced connections to their recording enterprise. Still, he and his band continued to perform with incredible ardor their ardor LED them to Irvoy, who George became buddies with. Woy, who managed one of the bars, which George's band performed. Woy had laboured for most important label MCA statistics. Woolsey commenced to talk to the people he knew, approximately George and his band. Those people got here and they cherished George and his band, however they were not convinced his musical fashion might enchantment to the wider market. What was this style that precipitated his rejection? Preserve watching to discover George felt crushed. However, this wasn't the time for him to surrender. He picked himself up and started to try tougher. George travelled to Nashville in pursuit of achievement, however. Not anything got here for him. He went from one studio to any other and were given rejected by using everyone among them. The disappointments chipped away at his confidence, and shortly, George became achieved. He had to provide for his wife and youngsters, and if tune wouldn't be the way he might do something else in among the disappointments in his song profession. George were given an offer to lay out farm animals pens for a ranch. It changed into an acquainted process. Not one he changed into eager. For however, one he had to do. George instructed the band that he turned into, going to give up and prefer that his dreams of being a huge musician changed into going to die. Norma wasn't satisfied. She knew that her husband wasn't enthusiastic about making cattle pens and she or he failed to need to be the purpose. He could give up track, so she, known as him for a heart to coronary heart dialogue, and asked him to provide track a shot for 1 extra year. George didn't need to interrupt Norma's coronary heart. He loved her an excessive amount of to try this to her, so he agreed to do tune for 1 extra 12 months. It turned into desirable fortune for him that he listened to Norma. Due to the fact in 1981, MCA signed George to a recording contract. However, there became a trap. George had handiest one chance with them. If his music did well, they might consider making an album that owned Threat turned into what George needed, taking his band together with him as backup. George released Unwound, his first unmarried for MCA Facts, and it did vastly nicely. The tune reached wide variety 6 at the Billboard Hot UI songs, and that became sufficient for an album. George launched his first album immediately, U.S., and prefer that he have become the freshest new factor on the block. His sound became taken into consideration, refreshing, alternate from the pop-stimulated us of a music that ruled the song industry at the time. George's sound changed into regarded as the brand new conventional country style. The sound paired nicely together with his authentic cowboy photograph and changed into praised for returning country. Tuned to its roots from that album, George solidified himself as one of the enterprise's brightest stars, but even the brightest stars dimmed the success of his first album, and Unmarried were not the most effective suitable matters that took place too. George in 1981, his wife, Norma additionally gave, beginning to their two baby, his son, George Bubba Strait Jr., in 1982. George were given extra achievement, hitting the first #1 unmarried of his career. With the music full-heartedly, he turned into capable of integrate all his passions into one. What will we imply? The legendary United States of America. Musician Eddie Rabbitt typically headlined the Houston livestock show in Rodeo. However, in 1983, he fell ill, and George needed to fill in for him. This marked another boom in George's profession, and it seemed that anything he touched turned to gold. He even went on a run of 5 projects that hit the primary spot on Billboard from 1983 to 1984, from Being Willing to End song around 1981. George received the Country Music Award for Top Male Vocalist with his initiatives, persevering with to hit the primary spot. Ash's profession grew, his wife endured to provide balance on the home the front, because her husband turned into going to be away for maximum of the time. Norma selected to forego a profession in order that she may be with the youngsters. At all times she became a supportive wife to her husband and protective mother to her children. She paid interest to the desires of her family, and because of her they thrived. Strait even gained the Country Music Award for the pinnacle male vocalist once more. It turned into an exceptional victory for him, but it changed into something he might sacrifice if he ought. Toto opposite the tragedy that broke his wife and him. Norma tried, as pleasant as she should, to maintain tabs on her children. Ash, her first toddler, Jessica, grew up and have become 13. She had many buddies. Norma and her husband attempted to reveal who Herples were and that they appreciated those she related to. So when she desired to move out in 1986, her parents failed to see why now. Not they allowed her to exit together with her friends at 13. They thought their daughter needed to sense a few degree of independence. Unluckily, that night in 1986 would be the closing time they could see their daughter alive. She was driving within the front seat of the automobile that she turned into while she went out, and wasn't carrying her seatbelts. The driver, Gregory Wilson Allen, become over-pushing while he were given to a flip. He couldn't navigate the turn properly due to the fact he become dashing. The auto flipped, and due to the fact Jennifer wasn't wearing her seatbelt, Shepherdly turned into flung out of the car, whilst the automobile landed on her facet, crushing and taking her lifestyles on the spot. The driving force become charged for a Category A misdemeanor for vehicular murder. However, the deed had been finished. Jennifer wouldn't be coming returned. Her incident highlighted the importance of listening and obeying traffic regulations. Her incident additionally confirmed the inclined facet of George and his wife. The two of them were shattered completely. Norma's coronary heart became specifically heartbroken, and George had to make an assertion. He decided to mention goodbye to interviews. He prevented all varieties of public discussion that might cause him speaking approximately the impact of his daughter's demise on him. And Norma, she felt like she had failed in her obligation, and she, or he, wanted Amina to deal with her loss. So in 1986, Norma and George formed the Jennifer Lind instantly Foundation. Through the basis, Norma hoped to find some normally and save you what passed off to Jennifer from going on to some other kids. The foundation aimed to provide for kids who didn't have, and Norma took her position as co-founder significantly as crushing, because the dying of her daughter turned into she still needed to be there for her son Bubba, who was just about 5 years antique on the time. She persisted to take care of her son as George persevered to perform. He failed to take a wreck from his duties as a musician. He couldn't take a wreck. The loss shook him, and the best way he knew to no longer sink into depression become to sing. As the demise of his baby echoed in his thoughts, George poured his grief into his track, and his stage performances went on a run of 11 immediately primary hits that started out in 1986 and ended in 1989. His numerous runs of primary hits might ultimately see him spoil the mythical Conway Twitty's file for most #1 hits on Billboard's Hot United States Songs chart. He could additionally emerge as the record holder for the maximum range 1 songs on all charts by means of an artist, in any style of track. The legendary musician's dominating run of wide variety songs noticed him get nominated for the Country Music Awards and Academy of Country Music Awards. He will be the maximum nominated for the ones. Awards. George then won the Country Music Award Entertainer of the Year in 1989 and 1990. He additionally won the ACM Entertainer of the Year in 1990, before prevailing any other CMA award in 2013, even as also prevailing every other ACM Entertainer of the Year in 2014. His winning of those awards will be the maximum of any USA musician as of this moment. George is sincerely above his peers in relation to country tune. Even his stores had been mythical and just like he pioneered a brand new conventional West of A-song style. He additionally created festival fashion tours which earned him huge sums of cash. It wasn't simply the cash that George got, he also extended his legendary tour, his The Cowboy Rides Away excursion at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, in June 2014, attracted a crowd of 792 humans and helped him create their record of largest indoor concert in North America. This wasn't the biggest crowd he would draw in 2024. He set the document for the largest ticketed live performance for an unmarried act within the United States records with over 110 humans at Kyle Field in College Station, Texas coming to watch him perform. Nevertheless, this crow